Welcome to Lesson 1.9, Plant Structure and Function. Make sure that you are filling out your notes as we go along, and make sure to highlight or mark your vocabulary terms. So throughout the next few lessons, we are going to start covering plants, and then we're eventually going to get into photosynthesis. So for us to better understand photosynthesis, we have to understand the parts of the plant. So seed plant structure overview. We have roots and shoots. The three principal organs of the seed plants are roots, stems, and leaves. So the root system here on the left here are all the characteristics of the root system, and here on the right, shoots, stems, and leaves. Here are all the characteristics here. So root system, we know they anchor plants in the ground, absorb water and minerals from the soil, store surplus sugars, transport materials, produce some hormones, and they interact with soil fungi that provide nutrients to the plant. The shoot system is responsible for photosynthesis, that is mainly in the leaves and young green stems. It also transports materials such as water, minerals, sugar, and hormones. Stems and leaves can also store food. They are responsible for the reproduction, specifically flowers, and hormone synthesis. Now, there are three main plant tissue systems. That is the dermal tissue, vascular tissue, and ground tissue. So dermal tissue is the protective outer covering of the plant body. So whenever you see dermal tissue, you should think epidermis, which is like skin, right? So dermal tissue is like the plant's skin. In young plants, it consists of a single layer of cells called the epidermis, and there is an outer surface called a cuticle, and that is a waxy coating that protects against water loss. The next one is vascular tissue. So vascular tissue transports materials throughout the plant. There are two types, the xylem and the phloem. The xylem transports water and minerals from the roots, and the phloem transports sugar, water, amino acids, and hormones throughout the plant. So here's a cross-section of a plant, and you can see here the xylem and the phloem. Next is ground tissue. So ground tissue produces and stores sugars, and it contributes to the physical support of the plant. The edible portions of most plants like potatoes, squash, and asparagus are mostly ground tissue. The diagram below shows distinct differences between two different types of plants, monocots and dicots, and it's just the way in which their vascular bundles are arranged. You don't need to know the difference, that's just if you would like to know. And here in the diagram, epidermis, vascular bundles, and ground tissue. Meristems. So when most animals reach adulthood, they stop growing. That is not the case with plants. Meristems are regions of unspecialized cells in which mitosis produces new cells that are ready for differentiation. So unspecialized cells mean that they do not have a specific assignment yet, right? So that could be whenever our cells are differentiating, then they start off just general, and then the DNA codes for this cell is going to be in the heart. This cell is going to be a blood cell, right? And then they have a specific job. So where do you think meristems are found in plants? And your hint is to look at the diagram to the right. What are meristem cells analogous to in animals? So for this question, meristems are typically found in places where the plants are going to grow quickly. So roots down here where they're branching out, as well as stems and leaves. Okay, so those are two spots where meristems are most often found, is in the regions where they grow quickly. And then second, what are meristem cells analogous to in animals? So you can kind of think of meristem cells as almost stem cells, right? So for us, we have stem cells, plants have meristems. Root structure and function. So we know roots support a plant, they anchor it in the ground, they store food, absorb water, and dissolved nutrients from the soil. Roots have an apical meristem that is protected by a root cap. So here's the apical meristem, here's the root cap. The cells of the epidermis of the roots typically have elongated structures called root hairs. And these here, the root hairs, just increase the surface area in which the roots can obtain water, because we know plants cannot get up and walk to find water. So instead they have these root hairs. Some plants also have specialized root structures called nodules that house bacteria that can fix nitrogen. So here's a reminder, nitrogen fixation by plants. So I believe this was mentioned first in our matter cycles lesson. So nitrogen fixation is the process by which bacteria convert nitrogen gas to ammonia. After the nitrogen is converted, organisms can use that ammonia and others can convert it into a nitrate or nitrite. Again, this is important because even though nitrogen gas is abundant, most organisms can't use it. And the diagram to the right shows the root nodules. So remember, bacteria can live in here and then they can fix this N2 gas into a usable form. And remember, it's because N2 has that triple covalent bond. It's really stable, so it's hard to break apart. So bacteria goes in and it breaks up that triple bond for us. So stems produce leaves, branches, flowers, and they hold leaves up to the sun. They also transport substances throughout the plant. Stems make up an essential part of the water and mineral transport systems of the plant. Growing stems contain distinct nodes here where leaves are attached. Small buds are found where leaves can attach to the nodes. Buds also can contain apical meristems whose cells produce new stems. So remember, meristems are found places where the plant experiences rapid growth. So here is a bud. That is where meristems will be found. Now on to leaves. So this diagram looks pretty complicated. You do not have to know every aspect, but it will be a little bit more important to understand kind of the inner workings of the leaf and where to find things whenever we get into photosynthesis. So the structure of the leaf is optimized to absorb light and carry out photosynthesis. Here the cuticle is secreted by the epidermis cells, and it is a waxy coating that helps prevent against water loss. The leaf is made up of mesophyll cells. So right here are the different layers of mesophyll, and they are packed with chloroplast. And here you can see all these little chloroplasts. The chloroplast is an organelle that's found in cells of plants and some other organisms that captures the energy from sunlight and converts it into chemical energy. The stomata down here is an opening in the epidermis of a plant that allows carbon dioxide, water, and oxygen to diffuse into and out of the leaf. So singular for stomata is stoma, that is one, okay, and they are found mostly on the underside of leaves. Each stoma is flanked by two guard cells, and the guard cells regulate the opening and closing of the stoma. So guard cells, we're going to talk about more here. Plants maintain homeostasis by keeping their stomata open just long enough to allow for photosynthesis to take place, but not so much that they lose an excessive amount of water. So think to yourself, what is homeostasis? We've probably heard that word before, but kind of recall if you can. So homeostasis is the relatively constant physical and chemical conditions that organisms maintain. Guard cells regulate the movement of gases in response to an internal feedback mechanism driven by the plant's own water content. When water is abundant, it flows into the leaf, raising water pressure in the guard cells, which allow them to open the stomata. So water is abundant, stoma would be open. When water is scarce, feedback works the opposite way. Water pressure within the guard cell decreases and the inner walls pull together and the stoma closes, shown here. So think to yourself, what is feedback and how would this dictate a certain response? So feedback is a response in a system that influences the activity or productivity of a system. So a common example would be body temperature, right? Whenever you're cold, you shiver to bring your body temperature back up. So that's that feedback telling your body that you need to shiver. And then whenever you are hot, you sweat to bring your temp back down. Okay, so that's that feedback mechanism telling your body you are hot, release the sweat, and then once that sweat cools you down, then you go back to your homeostasis. And then last, when do you think stomata are often open? So when water is present, stomata are typically going to be open during the day when photosynthesis occurs. Now to your exit ticket. Go ahead and pause here and answer these by yourself. Okay, so to check yourself, number one, the three types of plant tissue are ground, dermal, and vascular tissue. Number two, meristems. They are regions of unspecialized cells in which mitosis produces new cells that are ready for differentiation. We're going to cover mitosis more in Unit 3, but I'm sure that you've heard that term before. Specialized cells have specific jobs that perform certain tasks. For example, red blood cells are specialized and contain hemoglobin that carries oxygen. Unspecialized cells do not have jobs yet, and they don't perform specialized functions. The example for that is stem cells. Unspecialized cells will often become specialized. Number three, what is a chloroplast? The chloroplast is an organelle found in cells of plants and some other organisms that captures energy from sunlight and converts it into chemical energy. Number four, if water is abundant, how do the guard cells and the stomata react? When water is abundant, it flows into the leaf, which is going to raise the water pressure in the guard cells, which is going to open the stomata. So if water is abundant, then the stomata want to be open to allow for gas exchange and for photosynthesis to occur. Number five, what is homeostasis? Homeostasis is the relatively constant internal physical and chemical conditions that organisms maintain. So now that you've gone through this lesson and your exit ticket, again, go back, review, make sure that you have your vocabulary terms down, and we will continue to discuss plants over the next couple of lessons as we get further into photosynthesis. Thanks for listening.